An observer once wrote that the quality for which the people of Erie were most remarkable was an intense addiction to partisan strife, marked by a vehement pursuit of political controversy. Politics in Erie seemed to be the universal and engrossing topic to an extent and degree he had never seen paralleled. The writer hoped this was a temporary frenzy from which the people had long since recovered. Horace Greeley made these comments as a result of having lived in Erie in 1831. Since Horace is no longer with us, we've no way of knowing how well the people of Erie have recovered from their political frenzy, or the extent to which political practices in the city have changed over the past century and a half, if at all. However, one change during this, the most political of seasons, is certain. The city will see the passing of an era as someone other than Lou Tullio will come to occupy the mayor's office for the first time in 24 years. For the next hour, we will look at Erie's political heritage and future, the issues facing the city, the choices facing the voters, and the people who are vying to succeed Lou Tullio as mayor of Erie.
Well, there have been a lot of changes in the office of mayor. Over in the last century, Erie's gone from a mayoralty that had a limited amount of power to the strong mayor in the 1960s. The current form of the mayoralty is really only 28 years old. We've only had two mayors in the strong mayor form of government. The first one was Charlie Williamson, who was elected in 1961, and he served one term and then was beaten by Mayor Tullio, who has, of course, been in the office ever since. So the modern mayoralty is only 28 years old. The earlier form of the mayoralty, the one that existed for a previous century, was a person who, while elected as mayor, had to share that power with a number of other councilmen. And while he had certain duties in the government, and he was responsible for chairing the meeting, he was responsible for certain responsibilities, such as the streets or the parks, whatever he took. He didn't have, except in symbolic value, anywhere near the power of the modern mayor.
I think what you're dealing with from the standpoint of leadership in government, and particularly I think with local government, is that the mayor of any community will set the tone for that community. That community will depend upon the mayor for leadership, for policy making. Now, whoever is going to be the mayor of the city of Erie in the upcoming election and finally in the 1990s will have to set that tone in such a way that the city people, the city fathers, if you will, the council, are willing to follow that leadership capability of the person in office. One of the factors I think that's important as it comes to the position of being a mayor is the ability to make a decision. And there are hard decisions, I think, in the 1990s which are going to have to be made concerning local government.
I've had a unique experience in my years of journalism in Erie. I've dealt actively with the last 6 Erie mayors, and I got to know well the preceding 2 before that, so I've really known 8 mayors. I've known them well. I think by and large we've had a better quality mayor than many people give the community credit for producing. And I keep wondering about that because I hear so many people today that look at the mayoralty field and suggest that at best it's rather mediocre. And I think basically that I feel that's unfair. That I heard all 6, the 6 Democratic candidates on one occasion and the 2 Republican candidates on another occasion before the Kiwanis Club. And they all came across pretty well, and it made me think that just maybe this election will produce somebody as qualified in the long run as the 6 I've known personally, and maybe we worry too much about things not turning out the way they should, but by and large, after all these mayors, I'm still pretty optimistic.
The issues in this particular election are similar to that of most elections. Most elections run according to a script. Everybody in every election is interested in taxes, is interested in jobs, is interested in improvements. And so now the questions that are emerging, the candidates that are being looked at, are do they have the vision? Do they have the skills to represent this city? Can they project some kind of vision of Erie in the 21st century rather than how are they going to help me or my family or my group? So there's a major change in how we're looking at our candidates and what is being expected. The issues have never been very significant. It's always come down to, do I want that person to lead our city? And the issues become sort of transparent.
But some issues are important in Erie, issues such as the economy.
Erie's future is, I believe, tied to our economic future. And I think we have to leave the old idea of a Rust Belt kind of economy and move to what I call a Great Lakes economy. We have to focus on the Port of Erie as a trade center. We need to expand transportation, a lot involved in that. And we need to stress education, particularly in the high-tech areas. And for that, we need public-private cooperation and partnership, whether it's in a public school and institute, and particularly on college campuses, where we need research and development. Beyond that, I think there are several things that we need to build up. One is, for example, we need to look at different types of industries, what I call sister industries. If I put it simply, if we can make paper, why not furniture? And if I think we can do that, I think we can have a thriving economy for the future and jobs, and our kids can stay here in Erie.
Erie's renaissance can and will be sparked by a merger of interests, a united effort from all segments of the community. And its renaissance will only be realized when there is a collective effort welded together by a common goal. Unfortunately, there are lots of business opportunities, professional opportunities in Erie, primarily for young people. It forces them out of our town to seek opportunities elsewhere. And this causes a lack of trained young people, and that causes a loss of energy, a loss of leadership, creativity. And that's one of the most serious problems that are facing us to rebuild and reshape the economy of our city. It's not unreasonable to expect reasonable people to work together. And we must work together for the common good. We must replace doom and gloom, and with a positive attitude that will permeate throughout the entire width and breadth of our city.
I have a detailed program outlined in my position paper which will give Erie an economic resurgence not seen since the late 40s. I call it Marketing Erie. Some of the basics of this plan include launching a program to entice manufacturers and retailers to move into Erie because of the wonderful buys on the dwellings, because of the LERTA tax incentive program, because of the labor situation, which is very good, and lastly, the wonderful resources that Erie has to offer. We have to market Erie so our kids will stay in Erie and not be moving to other cities.
The industrialized northeastern United States are all grappling with economic issues, and Erie is no different. One of the considerations for voters is how each candidate plans to deal with the present and future economy of the city.
My opinion is that Erie's economy is basically sound, however it could be improved. We have to actively recruit new industry to replace those industries which have left Erie. This would be done by promoting Erie's many assets to potential industrial clients. Show them Erie's the best place to locate their industry or their business. Some incentives would have to be offered to influence industry to locate here, such as tax breaks, lower costs on water and sewer rates for a period of time. Finally, Erie's downtown area has to be revitalized. This would also improve the local economy. Modification of the Transitway Mall to make easier access to downtown businesses is a necessity. Also, introduction of a factory outlet mall or arcade-type shopping plaza in the old Boston store would bring Erieites back downtown. Also, others to Erie to take advantage of the many things Erie has to offer.
Erie was long known as a business industrial city, and during the past 10 years, we lost 8% of our industrial base. And this means that we lost almost 10,000 jobs in Erie. Now, this is something that has to be addressed. We need jobs, and also we need to reform our taxes if we're going to induce or have business come to Erie. So these things I wish to address, and we certainly have to consider the Penn State report that indicates that the Erie area shows no improvement for business and industry in the near future. So these are things that we must address, and I'm certainly going to do it with all of the federal and state programs that are available.
I think that the revival of most cities in the northeastern corridor of, let's say, the United States is going to be on the basis not so much of federal or state funding, which is pretty much dried up, but on the basis of community action, community goals. And if the mayor can foster that and promote that, he's going to be successful in his office.
Jobs and economic development will have the highest priority in my administration. I intend to appoint a business and labor commissioner, and this person will be full status cabinet level under the mayor's office, have the full authority of the mayor's office, and his chief priority will be to keep existing businesses here and to go out and seek new businesses to bring into Erie. This will all be done with no tax increase. When I say no tax increase, this will be an incentive to bring new industry in. This will not only be a boon to the homeowners, but will be a boon to the existing property owners, businesses and industry. And this is the way we intend to do jobs and economic development here in Erie.
We must keep in mind that those regions of the country that have had an economic resurgence have had several things in common, in addition to the transition from heavy industry to service businesses. What we must do is provide the necessary technical assistance, the training, the financing, the marketing and promotion to help these businesses. We have to create the proper business climate. This is very important and essential. We must also help form a major research capability and a coordinated service delivery system, and use a regional approach between Erie and Northwest Pennsylvania to attract industry to Northwest Pennsylvania. In providing the impetus to reverse the deindustrialization trend, the task force proposes to place primary emphasis on the following aspects of the manufacturing sector in decreasing order of priority. First, help our existing companies. Second, promote small business birth. And third and finally, attract new business to the Erie area.
The stimulation of the economy and the creation of jobs is going to be our #1 priority. There are many people in Erie who have employment, but they are underemployed, and we hear this complaint from people all the time. What we need here is a combination of government, education, business, working together to create new and better jobs, to enhance our economy and to provide for the types of jobs that we need as we go into the 21st century. This means that we must have young people trained to fit the needs that we are going to have in the coming years. We need vocational training that will provide the jobs we need for the 21st century.
Obviously, before anyone can do anything as mayor, there's the not-so-simple matter of running a campaign to be elected.
Campaigning is tough business. It's a tough business. Anybody that thinks it's easy to plunge into one of these campaigns obviously has never tried it. I've been a fence sitter all my life. Journalism is sort of a stay in the fence and look either way and try to be neutral and try to avoid partisanship. But I've always had a sneaking admiration for those people who have the courage to plunge into these campaigns. You risk a lot. You risk self-esteem. I always remember a newspaper reporter that worked for the other Erie paper, and this is back so many years ago, I can surely say this. He ran for city council, and he thought that having his name in the paper every day was a sure key to success, and that all he had to do was put that same name on the ballot, and the votes would come rolling in. And I watched his face election night when we counted the ballots at the courthouse, and all 600 of his votes came in. It was a humiliating and chastening experience, and you risk that when you run for office, which is why a lot of people who consider it, in the end, never do it.
The important factors in an election in Erie, Pennsylvania are basically the same as they are throughout most municipalities in the country, and that is name recognition and party identification. Those are the two most important factors in determining who wins and who loses.
People are still expected to meet people. That's still very much an Erie thing, because Erie people still are very much tuned to personalities. Small city. Politicians cannot be elusive. They need to be there and up front. And so it's a kind of personal campaign style that's very critical, as always, but it's a big difference. And that difference has been noticeable now for 10, 15 years in Erie. It's very noticeable on the state and federal levels, and that's the influence of the media. More and more the media are coming to play, particularly television, the major factor in a campaign. Going to be a big factor in this campaign. But the similarities of the fact that because the city's of manageable size and because most politicians know most people, or at least know significant numbers of them, it's still down to a people-oriented election, more than a media-oriented one.
Nature of politics and any person running for public office is what I would term two factors. One, you have to be an egomaniac. And I think secondly is that you have to be a masochist. Somewhere in between, you have maybe the ideal politician. The factor involved in politics is the belief by the individual that I can contribute to the community. I think public service today is very important. What we are finding is that a lot of young people are saying, I'm not going to go into politics. I think that a lot of young people are saying, give me a degree or get me out of a particular school so I can make some money. And yet politics is really an art. And I believe very strongly that Aristotle said, in effect, that the citizenry should be involved in the art of government.
As part of their involvement and responsibility, what should the electorate look for when choosing the successor to Lou Tullio?
Lou Tullio has defined the office of mayor essentially as a political office. And that is very appropriate in a democracy. One of the constant refrains you hear around this city and others is that politics is bad. Politics really is essential in a democracy. You know, one of the first things that a totalitarian regime will do will be to eliminate all of the competition, all of the opposing political parties, and really eliminate politics. But the mayor, Lou Tullio, has been able to function as a very effective politician who's understood the subtleties of bargaining and compromise. And it's going to be that aspect of Lou Tullio's tenure in office that will be most difficult to replace. It won't be hard to find a manager. It won't be hard to find a grantsman. It won't be hard to find a planner. But it'll be very difficult to find a politician who has the kinds of skills that Lou Tullio brought to the job.
The end of the Tullio mayoralty may mark the end of an era and the end of a certain style of political leadership. However, despite the appearance of continuity over the past 24 years, politics in Erie have always been characterized by change and evolution tied to the makeup of the community itself.
In the 1850s, you began what we have often referred to as the beginning of the cycle of mayors. Mayors that have been tied into ethnic groups, for example. The first mayors of the city were essentially people who came from the predominant ethnic group in the city, which were Yankees. And those mayors were pretty much influential in the city right up until the turn of the century. And then you had a kind of German period where those who represented the German ethnic groups took over. And that was followed in time by an Irish period in the 1930s, which ended in the 1950s. And then we've gone into a kind of Italian-Polish phase in which Mayor Tullio has represented the Italian phase. So we've gone through 4 or 5 revolutions of ethnic groups, beginning with representatives of that group, the Yankees, the Germans, the Irish, and now the Polish-Italian faction. The political process is a legitimization of an ethnic group arrival to power. Sociologists and political scientists for years have tracked the idea that when a political group develops a sizable middle class, it seeks public office. Until it gets that middle class, it elects somebody from another group that brokers for it in its best interest. When an ethnic group is in the working stage, they're worried about their families, they're worried about their jobs, they're worried about what their children are going to become. They don't have the skills to manipulate the process. They don't have the money to run. They don't have the knowledge or the interest. They're caught up in making a living, establishing themselves, and living for their children. When those children mature and become more white class, professional, middle class people, they have the skill, the money, and the interest. They'll run for public office. Public office in a city such as Erie, in most cities, is primarily a middle class occupation. It's held by middle class members of an emerging ethnic group, a group that has suddenly developed clout, and wants that office as a symbol of their arrival. So the mayoralty is a symbol of the arrival of an ethnic group, a group that has now matured and is ready to take its place, so to speak, as one of the leading groups of the city.
I think the mayors in Erie have been a remarkably diverse group, actually. Some had great people skills. Some could move into a crowd and obviously enjoy it and handle it superbly. Some were rather stiff. You've had a variety of talents that have gotten different people to the mayor's office. Some were good organizers. Clarence Pulling was a mayor, one of the first mayors I dealt with. He was not a good person in the sense of being a politician type, but I think he projected a competence factor. He was a former city engineer before he became mayor, and he projected a competence factor that stood him in good stead. At that time, his chief right-hand man was a finance director, or a safety director too for a while, Kenneth Momeyer, who was a retired brigadier general in the National Guard. And I always remember an episode with him. I had just gotten out of the Army where I was a corporal, and I go in and I talked to this brigadier general, and I was obviously very impressed. In a 5-minute conversation, I'd probably sir him 20 times. And there was a reporter from the rival paper, the Dispatch-Herald, who witnessed this awestruck performance time after time, and it must have gotten to him because we went in together one day, and he put on a performance that I'll carry to my grave, and that was that he went in and he sat at the desk beside the general's chair, put his feet up on the general's desk, and dug his heels into some of the general's papers and said, "What's new today, Ken?" And I'm watching all this. I never quite forgot that one.
Regardless of any individual or stylistic differences between one person and another occupying the office of mayor, the skill to lead is essential. The ability to run the city government is critical to the office.
As for city government services, our police protection is severely understaffed. This I would improve. I have plans to do this. We talk about infrastructure, our water and wastewater systems. We definitely have to go to a water authority, a working water authority, not just a leaseback system, because this still puts it in the political realm. You have political maneuvering, and this is out. No way will I, conduct a system with political. The other thing is that as for solid waste disposal, they're talking about putting in a solid waste disposal, waste energy system at 12th and Green Garden. This is the worst place that could be selected. We can't have anything like that in Erie.
City government's in chaos. This is apparent with the fact the city managed to lose $1.25 million for its pension funds by failing to file proper forms on time. In addition, the city stands to lose another $125,000, which was loaned to CAT Technology. I predict that prior to January 1st, when the first payment is to be made to the city on this loan, CAT Technology is going to file for bankruptcy. More money lost. This is taxpayers' money. The Erie water system has been allowed to deteriorate to the degree it has to be rebuilt and modernized from the intake pipes to the consumer. The former Water Bureau chief stood by and said nothing while the current administration used water profits to balance the general fund budget the past several years. Also, the City of Erie has no plan or budget in place for a preventative maintenance and timely replacement of city property and equipment. As a matter of fact, also, they have no inventory of all property, equipment, and supplies. One of the first things also I would do as mayor is to hire a business manager, budget director who has an accounting background to get the city back on a sound financial basis.
The city services that are presently provided to taxpayers are essential. We have to continue to provide these services. Taxpayers expect them, and we must provide them. We must provide the safety services of police and fire protection, and we must also provide street cleaning, garbage collection, and all the rest of the city services. We must do more with less, however. This is essential that we redeploy our people and our employees into areas so that we can give better service to the City of Erie without additional cost. We must work within the confines of the present workforce, and we must continue to provide the services.
We're going to need effective government at City Hall. We're going to need someone that can take charge of what's going on down there. Our city employees are good, qualified, dedicated people, but there's no leadership there. They need effective leadership at City Hall. I'm going to retain essential city services. Well, I'm going to improve on those essential city services, mainly in the police and fire department. We have to improve our police and fire department and bring them up to national standards. Sound fiscal policy is also a necessity at City Hall. Just the idea of the pension fund fiasco where the city lost $1.25 million because they failed to file on time. These things will stop in my administration.
One of the things that we're going to have to do is to bring together a variety of groups who have competing interests in this community and get them to engage in a common economic development for the entire community, get them to engage in a common battle against crime, get them to engage in a common effort to improve our schools, and so forth. And you need somebody who's got the ability to bargain and compromise, to get people into a room and get them moving in one direction.
I think part of the problem basically is the fact that the candidates have to take a look at where they want to take the city, what direction it has to go. And that direction will set the tone into the 21st century.
The biggest challenge facing the new mayor is obviously making Erie work with the limited finances that are presently available. There's just no getting around it. I went the other day and looked at a park. I was driving and I had a few minutes to kill, and I was just driving a few blocks out of my way. And I went past a park where I used to play tennis when I was a kid. And the park is in not good condition. And it's not in good condition because the Parks Department has been whittled to a shadow of its former self. There's just no question about it. It's one of the areas where there's no steady consistency, and when you're making budget cuts, the Parks Department has been one of the areas where it's been relatively easy to cut, much easier than the police and fire departments, which have also been cut. But how do you make a city work when there's no money coming in? And people say, well, how did we get in this mess? Well, part of the reason we got in this mess is the change of rules in Washington. For years, Washington was providing a steady stream of money to municipalities, particularly in older urban areas like Erie. Erie was getting over $2 million in revenue sharing money. It was getting urban development grants and loans. The money kept coming in, and Tullio was a master at getting it. All of a sudden, the spigots are turned off and no money's coming in. So that to make up for this money that was coming in, you have to raise taxes drastically or you have to cut services, and we've done a little of both. But in the process, our infrastructure has deteriorated. We're in a mess in many areas, and how is the new mayor going to deal with this? Well, he may get lucky. He may get lucky and we may pass revenue sharing, the state program that, or the state tax reform program. That's the big hope. If the voters on May 16th approve tax reform, the real estate tax will be cut and the city will have the greater option of using the income tax. And there will be an opportunity to increase city revenue to a degree, at least in the future. It's supposed to be tax or revenue neutral, but there is no revenue neutral situation totally in regard to providing money for municipalities when costs keep going up. If costs keep going up, or if you get behind like Erie now is, you've got to have money coming from somewhere. You've got to have money. You can't do anything without money. Look around. And the next mayor is going to have to deal with that problem, and at a time when there's no federal help, and unless he gets state tax reform, he's really going to have a problem, or she.
I'd like to talk about solid waste management and water resources, two very important services the city provides and is involved with. Solid waste disposal in Erie County, as you know, is now a private monopoly with ever-increasing prices. This is a problem we have been facing. We had a study session on it a week ago, and we'll have to face this problem in the future. There are no plans now to build alternate landfill sites in Erie County, and of course that only comes about generally when there is a problem and a crisis, which there is now. We're going to have to meet that challenge head on. Our water resources, as you know, we're located on the Great Lakes, a tremendous supply of fresh water. However, we do have problems with the pumping and the distribution systems that we're going to have to address. I think we should go to a water authority, could borrow money on a favorable basis for capital improvements, could draw upon federal and state funding when available, and it could also be more willing and able to use water resources as an incentive for economic growth.
The administrative structure of our city government needs a total major overhauling. And my first order of business as mayor would be to surround myself with the most serious, dedicated professionals. The total lack of accountability that's been evident in recent events is inexcusable and I think irresponsible. I will search for an administrative assistant who has a degree in city management. In addition, we will contract the services of a certified public accountant. We will tolerate absolutely nothing in the way of incompetency from all city employees, from top to bottom. We will expect and demand 8 hours of work for 8 hours of pay. Every job will be justified or that job will be eliminated. The road to failure is paved with good intentions. I submit to you that good intentions are not enough.
City government has to be refocused on the essential services that people need. The police department has to be restructured to focus on the patrol division, which really is the special division of the police department, not as it is now, whereby we're probably brass heavy. One has to know what the other is doing, and this is not happening now. Firemen should be equipped and should be trained properly to regain the traditional excellence of service that they've showed in the past. My administration will make the streets safe, we'll make your home safe, we will pump your water, we will plow your streets, and we will pick up your refuse.
I think people want the most they can get for their tax dollar, and they deserve that. And in order to give them that, I think we need a more efficient government, and we need more confidence in government. So I see that as a top priority. For instance, in the case of the budget, Erie's facing a budget crunch. And one way I think we can resolve that is cooperation between and among elected city officials. We haven't had that. I think we need that. City council, the city controller, the treasurer and the mayor have to work together to resolve it. I think that's possible. But secondly, I think we have to make government itself in City Hall more efficient. And the way in which you do that is to give a line item budget, to have job descriptions so everybody knows what their responsibility is, and to have accountability. By that I mean goals have to be set and they have to be met from everyone from bureau chiefs up through the mayor. And if we do that, I think we can hold the city services we have.
A mayor has to deal with more than just running the city government. A mayor also has to deal with the media, and the nature of that relationship may be a critical component of demonstrating effective leadership, whether as an office holder or as a candidate for office.
With the different mayors, I've had unusual relationships. I spoke at one time during this talk here of a mayor I really didn't get along with, and that mayor was Charles B. Williamson. I don't want to be unfair to Charles B. Williamson because he did some fine things when he was mayor. And he did some things that needed doing and things that were unpopular, and he made his contribution to Erie, there's no question about it. But in my personal opinion, he did not handle the news relationship part of his job very effectively. And I was a classic case in point. He thought that I was pro Arthur Gardner, who was the mayor he ousted. And when Gardner was mayor, I was pro Arthur Gardner because he was a great one for handling the news media. When he had a good story, he used it to best advantage, and since the Times was the big circulation paper in Erie, that was to my advantage, and it was a good relationship. I had a lot of good stories from Art Gardner. But what Williamson didn't understand, or didn't care about, was that once he became mayor, the ball game had switched, and I wanted to become a Charles Williamson man for simple self-preservation. But he didn't handle it that way. Instead, he ostracized me, literally. There was a period of about a year when the mayor wouldn't talk to me. Here I was, the reporter, and this is, I'm saying this publicly, and I never have before. As I get older, I'm being more candid. But there was about a year when he wouldn't talk to me, and here I was, the reporter for the paper with the largest circulation in a period when the paper still dominated news totally, and the mayor of the city would not talk to me. I've often thought that I could handle a college course on how to cover City Hall when the mayor won't talk to you. But it was a foolish performance. It was a foolish performance because if he was going to really discipline me, he should have carried it much further. He should have imposed the ban throughout his administration. In the Williamson administration, the big newsmaker was not the mayor because he was a man who was not verbal. He didn't talk much. He was pretty quiet. The big newsmaker was a guy he brought in from out of town, a director of public works, Frank Rice his name was, who was filled with schemes like saving money by not cutting the grass with power mowers, by using sheep. He brought in a sheep, and he was supposed to chew the grass around the water reservoir on 26th Street and thus save money because you wouldn't have to hire a workman to go around with the power mower. But that kind of silliness was good news copy. And Frank Rice loved news publicity. He cooperated fully, so here I'm getting all these stories from the Department of Public Works, and the mayor wouldn't talk to me. It just, in the end, that year went by, and I don't think anybody checking the papers for that year would ever know that the mayor wasn't talking to me. And as I say, that's a silly process, because in that year, the mayor was not getting his particular slant on things. The mayor wants to fashion the news as much as he can, just like a president wants to fashion the news. And Williamson wasn't doing that. He was a one-term mayor, and I think part of it was his unwillingness to face the facts of life as far as publicity was concerned.
The media question is an interesting question in politics. The media scrutiny, as it were, is more sympathetic in a smaller town. In a larger town, they don't often know the candidates. They don't often know the people involved. And there's a kind of distance that develops between them and the candidates. In a smaller town, Erie, for example, the media constantly are in contact with the people who are running. They know their friends and their families. They also know that they have to deal with them in the future. So there tends to be a more sympathetic treatment. It's not to say that they don't do the job, and or that they don't and wouldn't cover what had to be covered if it were unfavorable. But there's not the looking under the rug. There isn't the expose mentality, because they know these people, and they will have to live with these people when it's over. So there's a kind of live and let live mentality, unless there's something so strong that it cannot be ignored. They don't go looking for trouble the way, or exposés, the way the media might on a national election. You're not going to make your name by exposing things in a smaller town because of the great hurt and problems that these cause, and you have to live with the results of that. The result is there isn't the kind of reward for it. There's often a backlash to it that you're insulated from in a bigger community, and to which you might move on to in another community.
We've always had close scrutiny in Erie, and we've had close scrutiny in Erie because it is relatively, as Bill Garvey says, what does he say, small town, big town situation? Basically, in politics, Erie has remained a small town. The people who have won, by and large, are people who are well known. They're well known because they were athletes at some high school, or because in some other way they became prominent. A lot of athletes, the ranks of successful Erie politicians, the athletes, a great number of athletes. And that's the reason. It's a small town. People knew them through their athletic ability. They go on to a political career. But of the mayors I've known, several of them have had real grief on what you might call an ethics issue. The pain that's been suffered by some of these people is very, very real. Particularly to me, I witnessed it at firsthand, and I've always thought that politics is a delightful experience, and it can be highly entertaining, and you can see the lure of it, but the prices that some of these people have had to pay is pretty fearsome. And that's true in Erie, and it's been true all during the 40 years I've been in journalism. And it's this phenomenon of people coming to grief today that we see in Washington is not new. It's happened in Erie time and time again. Again, because things are so well known here. I've really no objection to use of television to bring candidates to the people. I think that's excellent. Public debate type things, programs that allow the candidate to enter your living room and hopefully present his personality and some indication of his skills at handling himself on his feet. Excellent. What's objectionable, in my opinion, is the 30-second spot which by its very nature is deceptive, often deceitful, and hammers a message which may be juvenile, even infantile. That's the objectionable part. And there's certainly less danger of it happening here because it is still a relatively small community. And I don't think media totally can get anybody elected in Erie. I think you have to get out and meet people. I think you have to participate in these public forums. I've been favorably impressed with the number of political forums that have been held or will be held during this campaign. Anybody that wants to get some appreciation of these candidates, their relative abilities, has had the opportunity. Not very many people to date, unfortunately, have taken advantage of it, but the opportunity is there.
Whether the public learns about the candidates through the media or through personal contact, the goal is the same, to find out which person best represents the majority of the people. And some Erie politicians have been masters at winning over the voters because of their common touch.
That is the kind of common man politics. That began at the turn of the century with a man by the name of Miles Kitts, who was mayor of this city in the first 20 years of the city's history. Miles Kitts was a very effective mayor. He was a people kind of mayor. I ran across the other day a woman who still had a gold coin that Miles Kitts gave her when she was born. He would find out who was born in the city and present these gold coins, which of course many people kept over the years. He was a kind of street politician. He was a very educated man. He was a lawyer, and he turned out eventually to be a judge, but he had a people sense. He would go into the bars. He would talk to people on the street. He had a love of people, and the common man could identify with him. And he represented that populist strain. That was, in the modern times, picked up by Mike Canavino, the legendary politician of the city in the 1950s and the 1960s. Mike, more than any other politician of modern time, knew how to press the flesh, how to get to people on a personal level.
Speaking of Mike Canavino, a rule that he always had that would be applicable in this current election, I think, with its numerous candidates, was Mike always had the theory that the more the merrier. I've heard him say it many, many times. The more the merrier, laddie. He used the word laddie all the time, which is one of the ways he got away with pretending to know everybody in town and not really knowing their names. All men were laddies. Anyway, he'd say, laddie, the more the merrier. He says, I'll get my share. And basically what he was saying was substantially true. And that's one of the difficulties of this mayoralty race, is, and particularly on the Democratic side. The Republican side's not nearly as clear-cut. But on the Democratic side, you've got 6 people, by and large with track records, who will get their share of votes. They've got a certain block that they can count on, so that the election boils down to the 10,000 or so that aren't in these respective blocks, so that the area of fighting is really pretty small. And it makes it confusing to determine just where those 10,000 are going to go. Very, very interesting election, actually.
Decision-making within a mayor's office is very important. I think a number of factors could be involved in that type of, or how I reach a decision. One is to surround yourself with people who are qualified in particular areas. Finance, for example, would be a good area to have an expert, if you will. I think secondly is the utilization of various volunteer organizations within the community to get input from those people as to a particular type of decision. And I think thirdly is that in the decision-making process, if you sit down with the people who are going to be directly affected by that decision and explain to them, this is the things that we have to do in order to achieve our particular goal, then a mayor of a community can sell that, literally sell that, I think, to the public, and the public is willing to accept it because they have that input. Now, there are certain types of decisions which the mayor is going to have to make on his own. No one can tell him this, this, or this. He is going to have to make that decision. Like Harry Truman once said, the buck stops here. The buck, in effect, stops at the mayor's office, and the mayor is responsible. That's the accountability of the office when it comes to the making of decisions. If I make too many wrong decisions as the mayor of a community, 4 years from now, I am not going to be reelected. So you have to balance off the interests of the community as versus the interests of the government itself, and in such a way you can come to, I think, a reasonable, logical decision which is going to benefit both.
Erie is the greatest hometown in the USA. I intend to have safe streets here in Erie where people can walk the streets back and forth without any problems of being mugged or purse-snatched. I intend to have safe neighborhoods. I intend to start participatory government where the input of the people will have the ear of the mayor. The next mayor should be a listening mayor, a mayor that listens to the needs of the people. I intend to have honest, efficient city government that the people can be proud of. Erie a few years ago was designated an all-American city. I intend to make Erie an all-American city each and every year, and for in the future generations to come to make it an all-American city. We celebrate We Love Erie Days just 1 week during the entire year. We should be celebrating We Love Erie Days every day of the year.
We all know that the city of Erie, ladies and gentlemen, is a good place to live, to work, and raise a family, and if God provides you the health to live out your golden years of retirement. Some of the areas that are very important to that quality of life are health care. We should encourage our hospitals to work closer together as they have in the past in getting their various services so they're not duplicated. This is a big effort that should be undertaken. We should provide more recreation for our children. As far as the arts go, we should encourage the schools to devote more time to the visual and performing arts. Housing, we should offer incentives to the home buyers to purchase and restore houses in neighborhoods of historic significance within the city. We have to do that. And housing should be made more affordable through equitable assessment and proper taxation. We should also enlarge the city of Erie police force on a phased-in basis over the next several years. We have to provide these services. It's very important that we do.
The quality of life in a city is secure when the residents know that fire and police protection are of the highest quality, when its officials are fiscally responsible, when unemployment lines are dwindling, and when they believe that they have a respected voice in their government. Few can disagree that Erie already offers much to Erie County to a high quality of life. We provide all of the athletic, cultural, and recreational events. Erie houses the main library, the museum, colleges and universities, the newspaper, radio and television stations, a stadium, a fine zoo, and a civic center. What's more, Erie has the potential for a water plant and a system so vital to the economic future of the entire Erie area. I want to lead Erie into a new and brighter tomorrow.
James Barber wrote a book many years ago titled The Office or Dealing with the American Presidency, in that he talked about what he termed passive or active type executives. It would seem to me that whomever is elected to the mayor's position in the city of Erie has to be an active politician. And politician is not a dirty word. Politician, in effect, means that I have an ability or an art in government, going back, let's say, to Aristotle. The active type of person in the mayor's office, and that's activity on the basis of not being negative but being positive, which was a second classification that Barber used in the rating, if you will, of presidents, can also apply from the standpoint of rating of mayors or candidates for mayors. Am I an active, positive type individual who in effect is going to lead the city into the 21st century? That becomes very important. If I'm going to sit back and be passive, or if I'm going to sit back and be negative as to where we can take this particular community, then really, in effect, I should not be in a position of being the mayor.
I'm not satisfied with the quality of life in Erie. Our homes are, the cost is a lot less than other communities. However, the taxes are too high, 40 to 50% too high, higher than neighboring communities. Our recreation programs, we're 243rd in ranking in Pennsylvania. Our kids don't have a place to play. Our pools are closed. Our wading pools are filled with dirt. No swings in the parks. No executive is going to bring a family in here to start up a business or to enter a business and raise a family where we don't provide for their children, all right? So we've got to correct these things, and these are some of the things I will address. We've got to have something, a more business-friendly atmosphere for downtown. We've got to bring people down and move them transport them a little faster than we're doing now. Parking is a severe problem, and this we'll address also.
Okay, Erie's quality of life is good. We basically have a small-town lifestyle in a big city atmosphere. Our young people tend to stay in Erie or close to Erie to go to college. They like the atmosphere Erie provides. However, they tend to leave the area to seek jobs elsewhere. We have to do something to keep these young people here. New jobs have to be found for these young people by actively recruiting new industries and new businesses. We also have to provide other incentives. Affordable housing and low-interest loans to make it easier for them to buy their first home. Show the young people we have good schools for their children, for the education of their children. Show the young people recreation opportunities abound here. We have Presque Isle State Park, the bay, the lake for the outdoors person. For the culturally minded person, we have the Philharmonic, museums, historical sites, and theaters which provide plays and musicals for the young people to go to.
More and more people look for a high degree of articulation from their political leaders. It used to be that a rather fractured English could be a political asset to a degree, showing that you were indeed one of the boys, that you weren't product of some superior school somewhere trying to put on airs. But I think that day is gone. I think that you're going to have to be increasingly articulate to be a successful politician in Erie or elsewhere. But nevertheless, I would think that in a town the size of Erie that ties with ordinary people and an ability to communicate at a personal level with ordinary people is a skill that will never die out. It's essential. Most of our successful Erie mayors have all had that people skill. It's essential. It always will be essential, I think, here.
Quality of life, I think, can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. To me, it means Erie. By that I mean Erie's the center or the hub. Our health opportunities, our historic, cultural, educational opportunities that are located here in Erie are not only shared by the people of Erie, but all of the surrounding communities. And I think the real challenge for the next mayor is going to improve that quality of life, not only for people here in the city, but all around. And I think if we can get to that point, Erie is going to come into its own. And I think we're also going to attract people by virtue of that. So whatever that means to people, and it means so much, that seems to me to be at the heart, really, of what this election's about.
If the quality of life can be rated as the ease which one can pursue individual goals, then municipal government can play an important role. Can you walk anywhere you want, anytime you want, without fear of bodily harm or loss of possessions? Can you buy a home without undue anxiety about the level of taxes, the condition of the neighborhood? Can you get a job with a meaningful wage? Is there a future for your children without having to move? Can you still speak with pride about your hometown? It has become more difficult for you in recent years to puff up your chest, smile widely, and say, "I'm from Erie and proud." Join me, become part of my personal plan for a revitalized, active Erie, a city ready to stand tall as it enters the 21st century.
I think that we have an excellent quality of life in Erie. If you look around and see the peninsula and all the boating and hiking and bicycling that's done there, if you look at the cultural and arts that are available in this community, if you look at the various historical sites that they're available to visit, I think we have an excellent quality of life. And then consider the educational facilities. The higher educational facilities have wonderful reputations, and our medical facilities are among the best in the United States. That is real quality of life. That is something that we can all brag about. The problem is we have to sell that quality of life to people. Our own people who have lived here all their lives do not appreciate the quality of life that we have in this community, and we must convince them it's great.
We've seen and heard the candidates for mayor. We've heard some of the issues surrounding the choices of May 16th. What conclusions are we able to draw?
To be an effective politician means that you have to be willing to make the tough decisions. If you are not willing to make the tough decisions, then politics is not the profession you should be in.
Local politics are not primarily issue-oriented. I think that it's There's a lot of personality involved because the candidates are closer to the people than, say, a person running for governor or running for president or even running for Congress, for that matter. And the personality, the person who can convince people that things are going well and that they're going to get better and do it with a smile on their face, that's more important than being issue-oriented. Another thing that's important in these times, I think, is the question of character. And that may be even more important than difficult policy stands. There's a political scientist by the name of James David Barber who advises the electorate on how to vote for candidates. He says it's much more important to look at the candidate's character than it is at their stands on the issues, because their stands on the issues are going to change from month to month, year to year, or even day to day. But their character is a constant. And really, it's the best predictor of how they're going to behave once they get in office. So, yeah, the candidates refrain from taking difficult stands on the issues, but maybe that's not that bad, because if we know what their character's like, we may have the best predictor anyway of what they're going to do.
Politics is a noble profession. Harry Truman listed as his occupation not the fact that he was a haberdasher, but the fact that he was a politician. That's a noble profession, and it's one which more and more people should become involved. If not, then I don't think they have a right to complain.
To go back to what James David Barber has written, perhaps the most important consideration for the voter is not the party, not the platform, and not the promises of the candidates. What is said today during the campaign may have to be changed tomorrow after the election, simply because the circumstances may change. What you really have to consider before casting your vote is not so much the political talk, but the person doing the talking. The character of the candidate is far less likely to change than what the person says. The character of the office holder is what remains constant throughout the term of office. We hope you've had a chance to gain a better sense of the character of those who wish to be your next mayor, and a better understanding of what it takes for someone to lead the city effectively. The choice is yours on May 16th. All that can be asked is that you approach your choice with a full sense of responsibility and a full appreciation of the privilege. Voting is too important to be left to everyone else.